Hey everybody, welcome to Based. I'm Nixops. Today will be just me discussing some of the current trends that are going on in relation to censorship resistance, and what people are starting to find out is how people in the media and how these big corporations and tech companies, and you've seen the hashtag big tech going around, people are starting to learn that these companies don't give two shits about the individuals or the users. Many of you have heard me talk before at great length about some of this, but it's important that we start actually having a meaningful discussion and taking action. Some of the things that you may have noticed was like the New York Times or the New York Post article that was being censored yesterday on Twitter. And many of you were asking some questions about why this is going on, and some people have DM'd me directly about how we fight this. And so part of that is why I'm going to be giving away a bundle tonight to help inspire someone to learn some software engineering to help working on products and building things to replace these. Understanding a distributed network, you need operators. Same thing in Bitcoin, same thing in Tor, same thing in all of these processes, right? You basically need someone to operate servers that you participate in. So in the other window there, you'll notice that I have what appears to be a website, and it's the New York Times Onion link, their hidden service link, and I'll post that in chat here in a moment. But basically, the reason that I'm showcasing some of this tonight is because I want people to understand that there is another avenue and that there is more to this than what people have perceived. One of the risks that we've ran into over the last few years is this heavy reliance on social media. And everyone lives on it, and people are like, oh, well, use Parler or use this or use that service, things like that. Let me give you some advice. Any service that requires your phone number is 100% not looking after you. Yes, you could use a burner. Yes, you could go through that process. But quite literally, why do they need that process? This is because it makes your data worth far more money. You may not understand it, but for impressions and things like that and ad revenue streams, your data is worth a significant amount of more money if you're able to correlate it to a phone number, to a subscriber. And the reason that is the case is because there's more validity to who you are versus there is just an email. Now, some of you have recently asked, well, why is this such a big deal now? It's not just such a big deal now, it's been a big deal. That is also why we are looking at putting Based outside of YouTube, because of the concerns of tracking and things like that, and also the impact that it has for the privacy of our audience. And I thank you again for your support and continued support. Our concern with technology is that most people have no idea how it actually works. So in the case of like what you see here on my screen, is that you're seeing that there's actually a complete functioning website that is the New York Times. Now, the New York Times has long been a proponent of utilizing the Onion service. As a matter of fact, last year, or 2017, they went completely dark to demonstrate that they could still operate utilizing the Onion as part of their service trees. And the reason they do this is because it is important to understand that quite literally the hidden services model is to protect you and to protect their journalists. They also have what's called a secure job. So does The Guardian, so do other journalistic platforms, including WikiLeaks and others. Now, you may ask yourself, why is this important to me? Well, here's the reason you should ask why it's important to yourself is to understand this. Okay, there are a lot of things that you may not understand about how cookies work and data transmission and information collection about yourself. The reason that's important to really start to grasp in today's time is that quite literally these companies are taking large amounts of information, and not just from their own site, but from other services. And what they're doing is they're building profiles. Now, recently there was a Netflix documentary about dangerous social media, but we're going to go a little step further. We're going to talk about the government intrusion into your personal life that you don't realize is happening. So, I hope all of you are ready for a fun night. We're going to have a little bit of fun, and we're going to go over some things, and we're going to explain some stuff, and you're going to figure out why some of this is dangerous, including like some of the issues with like SMS and things like that, and why these are risky, including why this applies to like KYC Bitcoin and KYC services such as Bitcoin ATMs. Now, as many of you know, there are plenty of services that don't do KYC. And there are plenty of platforms that only require an email. And I commend those platforms and I commend those services. However, in the modern times, as we've seen a shift starting in, I think it was like 2013, 2014, is now everybody wants this SMS validation. And the SMS validation was to get rid of a lot of spam bots from signing up. But as a byproduct of that, it's a compromise to you, the user. Now, most of you do not have burner phones. If you don't know what a burner phone is usually bought with cash, in which, by the way, I did an OpVile series on Twitter, hashtag OpVile. The first day was talking about utilizing the pandemic to your advantage, where you could go out fully clothed, masked, and everything like that, and literally be able to purchase a phone with cash, and how to safely set up an alternate number. Now, if you followed that, then you can use your burner phone for whatever service you choose. Just remember to be careful about associating it to your real identity. Now, many people may say, oh, well, I have nothing to hide. Why do I need to worry about these things? Glad you asked. So just because you have nothing to hide doesn't necessarily mean you don't do anything wrong. But also, you have to remember that unless technically under the law, it's supposed to read that we as civilians are not supposed to be under surveillance and or under review unless there is an active investigation. Now, big tech is guilty of giving this data without warrant and giving this data without really too many questions. Now, I can tell you this from working from, at a large telco before, as well as other, Valley startups, things like that, that literally these companies will give your data up very quickly, very easily, and oftentimes without warrant request. Now, this may seem silly, but think about everything that you do. Think about that time you were watching a video and you heard something you didn't understand, so you Googled it. Well, Google has that track record. Google also knew that for a day and a half after that session, even if you were in incognito mode, that cookie was still resonating and being live, that there is a trackable method that states it was you. So now all of a sudden, they build a profile. Now, don't think about what you did in one day. Think about what you do in the span of a year. Think about all the dangerous things that if you, not dangerous, but think about them in context, right? Like, under the assumption that you've done nothing wrong, but start correlating your search history and you start to build this interesting profile, even to someone who doesn't look up anything nefarious or anything dangerous. Now, all of a sudden, just by data, which, by the way, that's all they will argue, is that the data proves you were this person or this, that, and the other, that this data tells an interesting story about you. Now, this interesting story could be things such as you were looking up stuff for like pregnancy or, gender identity, or insert something here. Or maybe you were looking up, propaganda because you were interested about making a meme or something like that, right? Now, all of a sudden, the government has a different interest in you, right? So you may not see it as dangerous, but one of the things that I can show you right now, most of you on your home ISPs, and you can demonstrate this, by the way, is simply go to a website that doesn't exist while you're connected to your home router. What you will notice is that you will notice the DNS changed because it doesn't exist, but you will often land on a landing page for your ISP, such as Comcast, AT&T, various others will do this. That is a form of DNS hijacking. Now, this doesn't seem too terribly dangerous to most people because most people don't understand the implications. But what they just did was they took your request, they couldn't fulfill it, so they fulfilled it with their own request, and they made notation of it. Now, not only are they making notation of any other DNS request you're making, but just think about that for a moment. This is the people that you trust as your inbound connection to the internet. These are the people you pay. Now, they will also give this information to advertisers. They'll give this information to governments, and they oftentimes don't even require a warrant and or any court documents to be able to do so. Now, that's your first line. That means that the very basis of how you connect to the internet is compromised to begin with. This is very dangerous. Now, couple that with services such as, we'll say like Amazon Prime, we'll say Amazon, we'll say Google, Google Drive, Gmail, Facebook, insert whatever modern mainstream service that you will. Now, what you will find out is that literally all of them collect a large amount of data on you via cookies, via tracking cookies, and sessions. And sessions are a very interesting thing because most people don't really understand what a session is. A session is an active connection to a service. And basically what happens is that when you instantiate an authenticated login, by the way, this may not be palatable for some, and I understand that, but we're going to deep dive it and we're going to have a little fun. And we're going to also showcase some things that you can do to circumvent this. But think about it like this. You logged into your Gmail. Now all of a sudden you think you logged out. However, Google already is tracking you continuously with the cookie that's in your cookie jar, in your container in the browser. And if you're using Chrome with MetaMask or anything else, they're also quite aware of what crypto traffic you're doing if you're doing like Uniswap and things like that. Now, again, at first, this doesn't seem like a terrible thing until you start to read the fine print. Now, as you know, the EFF and other organizations have constantly put Google and other companies on blast about this stuff because they're giving this information to police departments, to law enforcement, and to three-letter agencies. Now, this is risky because what you may not understand is that they're using a dragnet method of data collection against you. Now, going back to things, you're innocent, yes, until proven guilty. However, think about what you've done in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You're searching, your research topics, things like this. Now, take away the timelines and just put that into a pure data look. And everybody starts to look a little odd. I mean, everyone's got a narrative that could be spun around any of their search history. Everybody. So what do these companies do? These companies provide that. Same thing with Alexa in your home, same thing with any of these devices in your home as well. So start considering that instead of it being this big, fearful government that was illegally wiretapping you, now you have these companies that you've invited in to wiretap you on behalf of the government, who they will just leverage to get that data. Now, people will claim, oh, well, that's not true. This isn't how it happens. Yeah, actually, it is 100% true. That is why they used an Alexa in a murder case, even though the Alexa wasn't technically on or being requested. That is, and I will cite those if you'd like, but you can do a quick search on DuckDuckGo and you can find it yourself. It's very easy to find this information. The rings, they're dangerous as well because law enforcement locally, even here in the South, they are partnered with law enforcement to give them access to it. Yes, you may say, oh, well, that's great to help solve crimes, but is it any law enforcement agency's business to know who's going to your neighbor's house? It is not. It is not law enforcement's business to know who's coming to your door unless you ask them to. Keep this in mind, that once you open this box of your data and this information, it doesn't close. These companies make a large amount of money off of you and your data and these partnerships. And what they do is they use it against you. So we are having our own data weaponized against us. Now, in the censorship, instance that we just saw recently, including some of the YouTube videos and things like that are going to get pulled, and this one probably will. It may not because of the fact that it's very small watch base, but we'll see. The thing is these companies are very concerned with the fact that people are becoming wise to this information. The reason why is because what they're realizing is that bias counts. And the reason that matters is because large associations and large companies have an invested interest to their shareholders and to the people who represent their company to be able to stay in the political game, but also to be able to continue receiving funding, large purchases, and advertising revenue, which, by the way, the advertisement revenue is a straight derivative of your information. That's how they are able to target you with ads. This is a full circle problem. What many people do not realize is that at the end of the day, your data, for every ad you get, they may get $2.50, $3.50 per ad that you watch on their platform, even on the mobile apps, even on iOS, even on Android. This is common business practice. The more focused and targeted the data or the data that they have, the stricter of a profile they can build on you, the more money they can get for your ad. And if they know that you will engage, even more money can be had. So there are entire companies that's what they do. They gamify the ad data, but this data is used against you. But again, on the other token, the law enforcement and three-letter agencies are using that data. And the Snowden revelation should have been an eye-opener for most people. However, we lost a lot of focus on that, and I don't quite understand why, but people have gotten extremely lazy with privacy. But what we're starting to see now is people are worried about censorship. And the problem is that when you start opening this can of worms, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of gag orders on the people involved in these types of censorship activities. Now, you may say to yourself, why would there be gag orders? Well, going back to that warrantless access to data, right? A large number of Silicon Valley companies and a large number of companies in general provide this data to law enforcement and others without the need of a warrant. So you start to have to questioning now, oh, wait a minute, why would they care about the censorship? Well, remember, they do have a priority to the shareholders. They do have a priority to the money. But they also have a priority to keep law enforcement off their back for how they're behaving, and lawmakers and lobbyists. So you got your hands in both cookie jars. And we, the users and the people in the society, are the ones who are losing. They are not. They are continuing to profit and reporting record profits over this. Now, some of you may say, well, how do you know so much? Well, I was a Silicon Valley insider. I worked in the Valley. I worked with companies who were building some of these tools. I worked with companies, including others, and, in my early days with telcos and things like that. And I can tell you that what you think is a dystopian future is already here. That's why some people laugh at us, like people like me, and say that, oh, you guys don't know what you're talking about. But actually we do. It's the majority of people don't understand the severity of what's going on. And the severity is that when you open your phone, which is a glorified tracking device that you can make phone calls on, which most people don't even make phone calls anymore, it literally is doing nothing more than giving this data to these companies, whether it be Google, Apple, or insert company here, unless it's like Copperhead or Graphene, things like that. There are some that are working on, anti-tracking. Librum's another one with Purism. But majority of them do sell this data. Now, you could say, oh, well, Android's open source, blah, blah, blah. Yes, Android is open source. However, Google Play Services is not. And Google Play Services is on almost every app you download. And that library by itself does an amazing amount of data harvesting against you. Do not think that because you have some basic level of software engine, like some basic level of how software works, that you are immune from understanding this process. Unless you write Android apps or you worked on Android apps, you really don't have an idea of how dangerous this stuff is. Same thing on iOS. iOS is a proprietary black box. And for a lot of it, yes, of course, it's Unix. However, it is a derived Unix, so it's based on the Mach kernel, that kind of thing, which I'm not getting into that deep dive discussion on macro kernels and how all that works. And yeah, that's for another discussion another day. What I'm trying to open your eyes up to here is to understand that yesterday's New York Post censorship is only the beginning of what companies like Twitter and Facebook and others have been doing for years. You just don't realize it because up until this recent election, most people haven't really been looking at the censorship model. They don't understand it. And the reason they're not understanding it is because it has never been as prevalent as it is today. More eyes are watching now. So as more eyes watch, more observance, more reality kicks in. You can say what you want to, but censorship has long been a process at Twitter and every other social media company. You are just now starting to see it at a grandiose scale because the New York Post is a trusted journalistic source to most people, and that they had cited sources. However, you're starting to see this bias, and with bias comes censorship. And with censorship becomes the unraveling of the perception of the reality you thought you understood when it came to software. And see, they trick you into believing that these services are platforms, like you have some kind of say over your data. You do not. Contrary to whatever you believe, you don't. And there's proof in this by some of you have reported recently, like on Twitter, that hey, like I stopped following certain people, or certain people became unfollowed. I don't understand why. Blah 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 blah. That's because you don't control the data. You don't control the algorithms. You don't control any of the processes that work. See, this is where services such as Mastodon are critical. Even today's Twitter outage should have been an indicator of dangerous parts, right? Because it's not distributed enough to be able to run on its own, so it's all centralized. So that means that someone controls every aspect of that. There's a team of people, just like the Twitter hack earlier this year. There are teams of people who have access to what's called a God mode. You may not understand what I'm about to say, but this is a very basic level. To all of these apps, there is a database. And to that database, there is an administrator. And to that administrator, there are a series of user accounts and or passwords that or keys that are distributed amongst the people who have to maintain and support that database. Because there are changes, there are new features, there are new fields that need to be added, columns, row types, things like that. All of those are done as part of their job. Now, we don't necessarily understand who's doing that, and that you may be able to find them on LinkedIn, things like that. However, that information is still there. So just like with the Twitter hack, same thing with the censorship. Someone can forbode or place a policy rule to prevent a URL string from being used. And that's where the danger comes in. That's why people like myself and others, you will often hear us talk about 4chan as being the like last bastion of freedom of speech. And people kind of laugh at me and say, oh, well, 4chan's like not really a bastion of freedom of speech, but quite literally it is. Barring you posting illicit pornography, 4chan pretty much will let you be as autistic or crazy as you want to be. Now, you could take that with a grain of salt and say, oh, well, that's bad and good, and yes, it is, but also remember that not always in the censorship-resistant environment is what you're going to be seeing what you want to see. For example, many people believe that Bitcoin is supposed to be this altruistic thing and all these other things, but then it's still used for some crime, but not really because it's transparent and it's really bad at certain things. Of course, but you have to remember, just like in cryptography, i.e. public-private key, you will have people doing nefarious things. You will also have people doing good things. You have people who are signing, statements saying that this is me definitively, things like that. And then you're going to have other people who are trying to hide behind keys and master, key exchanges and things like that to be able to suppress exposure of their identity, things like that. And this is all important. Each side of that argument is important because what happens when you're talking about someone who's trying to escape an oppressive regime? They need the same kind of protections as someone who's literally just signing a message from a definitive point of view, but also who could sign that message as a pseudonym. You see, each one of these sides of the argument are very critical, but each side of this argument of cryptography pros and cons and encryption pros and cons are all critical to us. Because contrary to what you may understand, you use end-to-end encryption all day, every time you fire a banking app, every time you hit Twitter, every time you do anything. 99% of your traffic is end-to-end encryption. And this is where the Earn It Act comes into play and where the censorship movement and everything are about to collide. And that's why I felt it was very important to have this discussion tonight and to open up to anyone. If you have questions, comments, please ask away in chat. This is a very touchy subject for some, but I'm trying to explain like I'm 5 here so that people who aren't as technically prowess, don't have the technical prowess I do, and some of you, that they can ask these questions and not feel that they're being shunned upon or that they're, being mocked. Because these are very, very difficult times to understand. And what the Earn It Act does is it plans to end end-to-end encryption. So you're going to get rid of a lot of pseudo-anonymity and a lot of anonymity if it were to pass. The problem is now that these companies, that are these platforms, by the way, the marketing phrase, are using your data against you and weaponizing it as a tool against you, and to be able to suppress your freedom of speech and be able to suppress these things. Understand that there are also tools that you can use to fight this. And that's why, like, privacyfirst.social, set up by Sabotage Beats and myself, is a Mastodon instance. And you may ask yourself, well, what the hell is Mastodon? Well, Mastodon is a Twitter-like service, except unlike Twitter, it's decentralized. Now, it does require an email, but it doesn't require a phone. The reason we don't use a phone is because Mastodon doesn't require it, and we believe that using Twilio, like every other company, is doing nothing more than recording your phone and being able to monetize your data. Now, how that works is you have a federation of Mastodon services that can connect to each other or block each other, depending if they want that community involved or not. And what this allows is similar to Bitcoiners and similar to any other peers and node processing, whether it be Tor or whatnot, and distributed network, you need operators. And so the more of these that you have, and the more of these niche communities and non-niche communities that build up around these services, eventually they nullify the outlast of the centralized services. In order for us to truly be in a censorship-resistant model where we can control what content we see, not someone else be able to affect us in a biased manner, we have to be able to be that revolution. Many people have it in their head that there's just going to be this instant service that's going to come out of the blue and do this for you. That's not going to happen. You will have to get involved with some of these communities and get involved with some of these services that you may not even yet know about and that may not even exist yet. And the reason this is critical is because you have to understand, just like in Bitcoin, Bitcoin can operate with hosted peers and public peers and things like that, but someone's still operating them. Same thing will apply on social media. Same thing will apply on news services. And this is why, like, it's important for us to understand, like, we're Tor, we're Mastodon, we're Bitcoin, we're censorship resistance, 4chan, and all these other things kind of coexist. And the reason for that is because the introduction and the mindset of anonymity. Now, you may not need anonymity. I am not anonymous. Some parts of the internet, I'm pseudo-anonymous. But if you were clever enough, you could probably figure out who I am on those boards, like on Dread or things like that. But it's important to understand that some people actually genuinely need anonymity. They don't need pseudo-anonymity. They need complete and utter anonymity, because they may be in a country with extreme regimes, oppressive regimes at that may compromise them in the sense that they could be dead, they could be killed, they could be murdered, become political prisoner for the things that they're talking about or attempting to communicate with other citizens in that region. Now, we take that for granted here in the United States, and I posted last night on Twitter a TEDx talk with Ioer, aka Jacob Applebaum, from 2014, where he talks about this stuff. And many people have it in their head that, oh, well, you don't need Tor. I think it was CX Weaver, someone I was talking to, and on Sunday that was back and forth. You don't need this. You don't need that. Well, that's great. You can sit up on high in your region and say that. But did you know there are places on the planet right now that they can't even make a fucking phone call? Think about that for a moment. They're being suppressed that they can't even make a phone call with landlines because they're afraid that people are going to orchestrate and rally together and prevent the government from its oppressive rule. So what do? They cut communications. Rule number one in stopping revolutions is cutting communications. I don't care what you think everything else is derived from, but communications is number one. You stop communications, you stop organization. From there, the rest is just power plays of what they already have in place. That's the danger. You don't realize it because most of us have never been in an environment of extreme adversarial conditions. Understand, if you're American or European, you probably don't give two shits about what I'm saying, and I understand that. Understand this isn't necessarily for you, but also understand that it is for you. As you're starting to see with censorship picking up, and we're just talking about an election. We haven't even started talking about people getting upset about the fact that we've been under this quarantine lockdown and there's a lot of misinformation even being provided to us by our government. When you start questioning governments, when you start questioning technology, and you start questioning people who run this shit, they start to get very peculiar about these things and they start acting out. Now, again, going back to the dragnet that's in play. As a government, you already have your people entrenched with surveillance, whether or not they admit to the surveillance. You may think that, oh, well, okay, cool, I use Twitter, great. Well, Twitter knows what you're doing. Twitter knows your geolocation information. If you turn it off, they still know. They can get this information through tracking and impression guides and amplitude data and various other things that you're using within their app. Cool. So now Facebook can also get that information. Google can get that information. Everybody can get this information from everyone else's cookies and trackers. Well, it's pretty easy to build a profile of who you are, where you are, and what you're doing at any point in time. This is dangerous because now when you say, for example, you're going to post an article that, say, for example, maybe you wrote, maybe an article that you're sharing that maybe hasn't hit the headlines yet, maybe some information, or maybe you want to share something with someone. Well, how are you going to do that with all these people knowing these things? That's where Tor and anonymity processes come into play. This is where creating pseudonyms and live CDs with like the Tails operating system come into play. This is where real OPSEC rubber hits the road. Many of you may think, well, this is some dystopian fairy tale shit, but reality is starting to set in with some people that it's there. It's no longer a joke. When companies are censoring just basic journalism, and keep in mind, that was also part of the problems with people like WikiLeaks. Understand that Julian never actually never got data himself. People provided that data to them. Okay, they were edited by places like the New York Times, the New York Post, Rolling Stone, and others. This information comes out and people's lives are in danger. Things happen. Reality isn't as pretty as the fantasy world you think that you live in. The thing is that you have to understand that you're either going to be a part of a solution and work towards the creation of a better world, or you fall in suit as the sheep and you stay in the herd. The thing is that you can dance the line, but you have to understand how it works. And if you don't understand truly how it works, you're going to make a mistake. And when you make that mistake, it could compromise your family, it could compromise you, and it can put you in a very peculiar situation or a dangerous situation. You know, and like I said, I wanted to kind of open tonight as this informative piece about understanding surveillance. Surveillance is not what you think it is. It's not government wiretapping. Governments don't need a wiretap. You've invited these companies into your life. They can now just tap these companies. And companies do sometimes report that they've been, they will give your data up. Sometimes you'll get a notification. Sometimes they'll say, yeah, your information was provided to law enforcement, but it won't be during that time. It'll be months later, sometimes years later. Sometimes not at all. So think about that for a moment. You use Gmail, most of you do, for a lot. Just like that recent darknet hack that happened with Daniel's hosting. There are people using Gmail for darknet sites. That's silly. Are they using GPG? Probably not. By the way, I'm drinking Rockstar if anybody cares. But yeah, like basically what happens is these people are using Gmail. They're not using encryption. And they're having these communications about certain services and processes they're running in their own lives. Google knows this stuff. Google also has made it very clear that they will run targeted ads based on what's in your email inbox. You can see them. Trust no company. Trust no service that offers this type of this mentality. Google used to be like, don't be evil, but that has obviously changed years ago. Things have changed drastically. And so the purpose of this is to help you understand that while you may not see these threats of like censoring a New York Post article, think about also what Twitter was doing during COVID's start, right? Many of you were suspended, even for 24 hours or for days, some weeks, because you made a comment about COVID, or you said the word scamdemic, or you said anything that was contrary to the bias. If you don't see the inherent dangers there, understand that also governments are aware of your statements. This information is publicly available to them. or not publicly, it's privately available to them in databases and Twitter firehose feeds that even you could sign up for. You can sign up right now. Go to developer.twitter.com and literally get a dev key to be able to access the firehose, and you can build your own machine learning against what other people are saying. And then you can also get information about Twitter's banning and suspensions and timelines and things like that. And you can build your own data sets. Don't think for a second governments aren't doing this, not just here, but around the world. We have allowed a dragnet to be created. It is our job now to change how that dragnet works. Either we continue to let it weaponize against us, or we fight back. Fighting back is not going to be like some glorious crusade like some of you dumbass maxis think that you're going to be out there. I'm running a full node. I'm fighting the power. That's part of it. The other piece is that you're going to be running services like Mastodon. You're going to be using Signal. You're going to be running distributed software like Ricochet and Matrix and all this other stuff. And you're going to have to support these networks in order for this stuff to work. It's not going to be as easy as a cakewalk. It's not going to be you install one app on your computer and that's going to fix it. It's a lifestyle change. It's a change of understanding. You know, yeah, sure, running Tor is great. You also need to understand that you got to be able to provide bridges to the people who can't access Tor. Just like what's going on in Africa and the Stop SARS, protest and Tor is asking for people to have bridges and, telling people how to request them. That's real circumvention against oppression. You don't realize it sitting comfortably in Berkeley. You don't realize it sitting comfortably in England or somewhere else in the world that you live outside of it. There are people who are really facing issues. Now, is this coming to the U.S.? It very much is. Now, you may say, oh, well, that's a little far drawn. But is it? Again, consider what I've just stated. Dragnet creates datamap. Datamap doesn't care about whether or not you searched for something 4 years ago or 4 months ago. The narrative can be painted. Once the narrative is painted, you're added to a list. Once you're added to the list, now you're being watched. Whether you want to admit to it or not, you're being watched and monitored. And these services are giving that data up willingly in order for these law enforcement agencies to participate in active monitoring. Now, all of this goes back to whether or not you as an individual care about your privacy. And you should. You should care that there are people who want to be anonymous, and you should support people to be anonymous. You shouldn't care whether or not they did something wrong or incorrectly based on your feelings. You should care whether or not they have the right to remain anonymous. Anonymity is a right. Privacy is a right. Everyone deserves these rights to privacy. The reason why is because you should not be chastised for something you said on the internet, because you should have the right to your freedom of speech. The moment you remove anonymity and pseudo-anonymity and privacy, you begin to create a totalitarian state that can now actively enforce bias control and true censorship as if it's a communistic rule. There is a country that already does this. It's a very big country. You might have heard of it. It's called China. Certain things they can say, certain things they get away with, certain things that the government doesn't care about anymore, but certain things they can't. They do get in trouble about them. There are plenty of examples of this. There are people who've been jailed over memes in China, over Winnie the Pooh memes, literally have been jailed over a Winnie the Pooh meme because it's a slight at Xi Jinping. Now, you may not find it as serious as they do, but again, this is just the start of a trend. Understanding that this world that we are living in today is not like what we think it is. The perception is that this data and all this information is being used just for ads. Understand that that data is also being used against you and used to build profile data and used to build these things that will be used to targeting you. And by target, I mean whether or not you're enforcement of your statements, whether or not you're abiding by some social rule, whether or not you're abiding by certain other things that they can construct. Twitter is not a safe platform for freedom of expression and freedom of speech. They are a publicly traded company who has shareholders and people who have proven time and time again that there is bias, there is censorship, and there always will be. Same thing with Facebook. Now, on the other topic of this, many of you don't understand that the dark web, aka deep web, whatever you want to call it, is quite literally nothing more than shit you can't search on Google or shit that's not archived. Now, some of you also have it in your head that there is this large amount of nefarious negative activity that goes on there. This is inaccurate. As there was recently an article about Facebook and others, there is actually more illicit material on Facebook than there is anywhere on the deep web. There's more illegal shit going on Google and Dropbox and services like this than anything that could ever exist on Tor or on I2P. Now, many of you may not understand that. Diverter, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to be honest. Many of you may not understand this, but there's literally much more on the ClearNet, and when I say ClearNet, I mean everything that you're used to, not privacy-centric, that is available for exploiting adults, children, and things like this. And the reason why is because most people understand that. And it's easier to hide in plain sight. And so they create private groups, and unless that group is reported, Facebook, Twitter, and these other types of things, they don't ever go investigating unless law enforcement asks about it, right? And then all of a sudden they're investigating. So the real problem is the perception of privacy. The perception of privacy enabling tools such as like CoinJoins, utilizing like, Whirlpool and utilizing privacy centric tools such as Tor and using VPNs correctly. If you do have to use a VPN and you should use Tor, but if you must use a VPN, you use it correctly, you understand your risk evaluation and your attack vectors, and using software properly. The perception is that that's wrong, and that is a byproduct of the media painting these pictures for you to confuse you, to make you think that these things are illegal, and they are not. What they do is they enable you. They give you the power. They take it from governments and they give it to you. That's the danger. That's the only real problem. Now, many of you may say, oh, well, Tor was created by the government. Yes. So was SHA-256. End of discussion. Otherwise, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, like I said, SHA-256 based hashing function, core of Bitcoin. If you want to go any further, then we'll stop right there. So anyway, going back to things. Governments sometimes have to create software and release it to the world in order for certain things to go on to protect themselves. This is part of doing destructive methods or mutual destructive methods. Remember, correlation attacks exist. All of these things are very important. There's multiple facets of each vector on each piece of this, whether it be Tor, Bitcoin, or whatever. Every piece of software has attack vectors. You have to understand them. If you don't understand them, then you're really bad at OPSEC. But OPSEC is important because that's your operational security. One of the things that I wanted to be able to show tonight is that some big names actually have services on Tor. Like I started off by showing the New York Times, right here, looking at their Asia Pacific site, you'll notice that a lot of the ads are blocked. There's not a lot of information on there that's, JavaScript heavy, things like that. And the reason why is because Tor by default turns this off, and you can enable these things. As a matter of fact, you can see right here that there would be like some kind of ad that's not loading correctly because of the fact that it's blocking. Now, what you may see in all of this is that, yeah, there are some interesting things there. You have the Guardian Secure Drop. You got like Quarantine Radio, which they have, which is ran by Sabotage Beats. Hell, even Twitter is accessible through the deep web. Here's me talking, on Twitter about the giveaway that I will be doing this evening here in just a moment as I roll some dice to see who's going to get the bundle. And what you're going to notice is that there's also people who are bloggers, like Cass Pianci. Like right here, a full-fledged, article with information and a blog and actual in-depth journalism about how certain things, and yes, this is also on his Medium, but he's choosing to put this on Tor as well because he feels that Medium could be deplatforming, which they have before other people. So, why is all of this important to you? Because all of this goes to show you that contrary to what most people believe, on any side of technology, there's good and bad. Yes, there is a Facebook diverter. I don't have it pulled up. I could probably find it. Matter of fact, let's go through its search engine on Tor. Give me 1 second. Let's look for it. Facebook. Well, let's see. No, these are all not going to be priorities, so I'm not going to continue to look through that because I do not want anything to pop up that's not supposed to pop up, as it is uncensored. Torch is an uncensored search engine, so you may find things that you may not be looking for. There's also a reason I don't have the URL accessible because some people may find that to be an enticement of an agreement to have you go there. So there is a Facebook hidden service. Do not think there isn't, because there is. Facebook has had hidden service for years. Oh, that is the Onion? Okay, cool. I'll pull it up. Sorry. I didn't realize that was the actual Onion. I'll pull it up. I thought you were just telling me to look for it. And here we go. We actually have the Facebook hidden service address. So as you can see here, it is Facebook. It is their login page. It is everything that you thought it was. A lot of these companies have hidden services URLs. A lot of these people do know that their sites are blocked. Like in China, Facebook is blocked. Twitter is blocked. They have Remrin. They have their own, substitutes for them. Now, you may say to yourself, well, why do these countries do that? Well, that's a form of censorship. All of these methods are forms of censorship. You do not necessarily perceive them as censorship because you live in a country that doesn't censor the internet as much. But there are rules and guidelines about data protections and things like that. And this is where all of this hits the road. These companies have to show you no allegiance. They are not required by any laws to protect you. They're not required by any laws to protect you from governments. Sorry, I'm getting some dice out so that we can roll to see who won the bundle here in a minute, and then I'll get your information in DM. So one of the things that happens is that a lot of people fail to understand that these companies don't give a shit about you. You are a number, and you will always be a number. And that number represents your value score of how much ad revenue they get from you. That is it. Anytime you're the product, it never ends well for you, especially when something is, quote, free. Nothing in life is truly free. It is free as in free beer, sure, or free as in free software. But there are still problems with that you have to understand. There are compromises made. Free and open source software is not perfect. It tries to be, and there are still problems with it. That's why there's always people and developers such as myself and others who are constantly auditing code, testing and verifying things. People like Geeknik and them who are fuzzing and attempting to find bugs in the software that people rely on and use. These are very important pieces of the open source community, and these are also very important pieces to you, the consumer. Now, going back to all of this and tying it up into a little TLDR for you, software is dangerous. Businesses are dangerous. People have it in their head that, all these companies are just altruistic and looking like and everything like that. They're doing all of this. Quite literally, no. It's for profit. It's for money. You are the product. If they can make $2 more per day off of you, they fucking will. Because what you don't understand is that it costs money to write software. It costs money to run a company. There are infrastructure costs, developer costs, CEO costs, board costs outside of that, director costs, people to manage and build features, designers. All of this stuff adds up. Average salary in Silicon Valley say 2 years in, you should be making no less than like 120 to 175. Okay? Sounds like a lot of money. But for most of the country outside of Silicon Valley, except for living in Silicon Valley is super expensive. Well, maybe not this year because of COVID. But All of these things are factors that add into the total cost of ownership of the business. They have to profit. So understanding that in a distributed network, you don't have the profit margins. You don't have profit, right? So people who are running distributed nodes, distributed networks, things like that, they understand that there are operators and people who run these services. That's how you compromise. The compromise is not that you're basically giving up the ability to communicate, you're giving up the ability to have your data used against you. You may pay for it in some way, shape, or form with donations or buying services or whatnot. However, at the end of the day, you're doing so that your data isn't compromised and isn't being sold. That's where the rubber hits the road. And what people are not realizing is that this is the future. The future of everything is that you, in a distributed network, are going to be the one who's going to decide whether or not your data is going to be utilized against you. If you don't perceive it that way and you don't understand it, then you haven't looked around at what's going on with the data today. Data is very critical. Data is what fuels our society. Whether you want to look at it or not in that way, data is everything. That is how software as a service has mostly made money, is the fact that they're really cutting corners on what they're providing, but they're doing so in a way so that these social media platforms, because again, they use it as a marketing term so that you feel some kind of ownership, which you do not own anything, by the way, on these platforms. That's why Twitter will tell you to remove posts, to do this, to do that, or stay suspended or get your account banned. This is part of the business. This is how they draw attention. Because something going viral and something drawing people to your platform is all it takes. But everyone that's in this chat, everyone that's watching, is already a fan of privacy, Bitcoin, and technology, should already know that you gotta change the game. And you can't do that by not participating. So you run a node, you set up Mastodon, you run a Mastodon federated peer if you want, and you participate in distributed network communications. You provide people these tools, you educate them, you make them understand that, yeah, sure, you still want to be on Twitter. Hell, I can use Mastodon and Twitter at the same time. I tweet on Twitter sometimes, it shows up on my Mastodon. I tweet on Mastodon, it shows up on my Twitter. You can see this happen all the time with a gateway or a bridge software. Now, the important thing is that all of this boils down to two things. What do you value your data at? And how far are you willing to fight for your rights for privacy, anonymity, and censorship resistance? I have long told people, always use 4chan. 4chan is the most censorship resistant place we have on the regular internet, and it is true to this day. They will not just pull shit down unless it violates some really fucked up laws or it's illicit porn. They have a very good moderation team, and that's what it takes. It takes moderators to make this possible. Even today, someone was talking about Slashdot, and Slashdot to many of you may not be known, but Slashdot has long been a tech resource that, used to, you wanted your site to end up on Slashdot. Because Slashdotting someone's site meant that it was going to get DDoS with the request because people wanted to go look at it. But it was also because they didn't just allow you to put up bullshit like you can on other services and sites today, like on anything, right? The thing is that it was kind of vetted. You had these team people like Cowboy Neil and others who vetted this stuff. And you had a process. And I'm not saying that process is better. But what I'm saying is that as we have gotten more into this kind of too many people and more numbers thing, what we've learned is that with more numbers comes more hassle. And companies like Twitter and others use algorithms now to automate this process of removing stuff, finding keywords, things like that. But they don't understand context necessarily. Hey, nothing wrong with sending competitors to Slashdot. Slashdot's still good. I am here trying to explain this in a way that I hope makes sense. And I hope all of you have gathered some form of learning from this to see the dangers and the perils of platforms. because they're not platforms. Platforms is a marketing tool to imply that you have some kind of control. Even cloud providers give you this idea that their platform is something you can control. However, they can pull the rug on you and shut you down in a heartbeat if they feel you're violating their terms of service. And again, understand that goes into a book or a database that law enforcement can also see. And so what you have to understand is that nothing in life is free. No service, no anything is going to be immune from censorship unless you own it, control it, or you work with others who own it and control it together. Then you get truly censorship resistant models. You can never have truly censorship free without the compromise of you're going to see things you may not like. This is a product of that. Because when people are able to speak their minds, they're not going to always be what you want them to say, or they're not going to always be things that you want to hear. Reality is never as pretty as the make-believe that we like to make it. And the fact is that data and big tech companies are very dangerous. I've been saying, all week that big tech is dangerous, and big tech is very dangerous. People oftentimes do not understand how dangerous it is. Some of the things that I talked about today, you would not be privy to unless you actually worked in tech. Some of this stuff would not be privy to you because you didn't work for companies who were doing targeted ads, or you didn't work in big data analysis, things like that. These pieces of information and this insight only comes from people who have been there. That is why a lot of people say these things and a lot of people kind of ignore them. But their harsh reality is this is real. This isn't some made up, boogeyman story that, I'm trying to tell you or someone else is trying to tell you. This is the reality, the harsh reality. And there are now people and documentaries that are coming out about it. But this is stuff that a lot of us have been talking about for years that needs to change. Now, recently, like I said, Sabotage Beats and myself set up, privacyfirst.social. We plan to make a version of Mastodon that doesn't even require an email. You can just use a public key, not a Bitcoin public key, but a GPG public key. That will be later on down the road. Now, you may ask yourself, well, why does it even require an email? Well, that's just how Mastodon is set up. It's open source software. You can go and audit. It's just a verification to make sure that there's no spam bots signing up. Now, dangerous part about any of this stuff is that any service that requires your phone number, whether it be Parler, whether it be Gab, whether it be Note, any of these things, no. Rule number one, no. The reason why is because they're using Twilio. Regardless of what they do, Twilio will tell law enforcement or tell government agencies that literally you signed up for that service under the subscriber ID for that service. You can deny it all you want, but literally Twilio is the service that provides the SMS because they have a great SLA for SMS delivery. And you have to give it to them because that is their business model. Now, you also have to understand that there are layers to these business models that people also don't understand unless you're privy to it. And that means you've worked on it. And all of these things form a nice little dragnet that can say definitively, you use this service and signed up on this day with this handle, doing this with this phone number. And unless you got a burner phone, you're cooked. And that may not sound bad because you may not be doing anything illicit. But what happens when they start cracking down on you talking about certain things that are, we'll say, taboo? What happens now when all of a sudden you want to post that New York Post article and now they're wanting to come after you? They're wanting to come after people who maybe got a leak, or, I'll even bring up what happened to Barrett Brown, posting the HB Gary dump, okay? He literally just posted a link that was shared with him. Sure, the link had not been checked on all the data and there was some credit card information in there, but literally he served time for posting that link. So do not ever think that there is no ramification for your actions on these platforms. It's quite the opposite, and don't expect it to ever get less of an impact. Yes, Ted Cruz and them are talking about subpoenaing Jack and all this other stuff, but there will be gag orders. There will be a lot of things that aren't discussed, even in front of the committees. Why? Because there is an entire backroom dealing of how governments interact with these companies, and they get this data because it's surveillance. Again, they would need warrants to surveil us directly. They don't need them when these companies are willing to cooperate with them and to be able to stop terrorism or to be able to stop, bad actors and malicious intents and all this other stuff. There's a lot of things that you don't understand in the verbiage because it's all written in lawyer specific writings and legalese in the context. And those words are very important. There's case precedents for this. And so I warn you to tread lightly, but to understand the tools that are available to you and to utilize those tools and utilize those tools correctly. So what I'm about to do right now is I open the floor to questions. If you have comments, anything, start asking them. I'm going to make a list of people who are in chat who have retweeted the giveaway. And basically I'm going to then roll the dice, pick somebody, and then I will roll a few more and then send some DMs so that we can get some of these bundles given out. I'm going to give away one complete bundle, and then I'm going to give another couple of small ones out. And if there's a specific book that you're interested in directly, like that's in one of the tiers, and you don't want the whole bundle, just let me know. And then that way I can give the whole bundle to someone maybe who needs it more. I don't know. Just understand that's what I kind of plan to do. All right. Start using yen or better stand. I would stay in RSA for right now, Diverter. ECC keys are coming up, but again, people should start using them, and I mean, you know what? That's a good thing. Maybe we should all start using them in parallel. Maybe make it a little harder for law enforcement, things like that. Bitcoin Jake, I started coding when I was 13 actually. Friend of mine, not a friend of mine, the guy worked at a local computer store, didn't know what kind of machine I had, and I was getting help from him, and literally he started talking, and he realized I had a Unix box that was an old Next, because my mother their office had upgraded. So at that point, I started running Perl, started developing in Perl. So give me a few moments here while I make this list. Go ahead and ask away if you have anything else that you want to ask people. I am just using VI real quick. Somebody also retweeted, I don't know who you are because I think you're on private and I don't follow you, so sorry if you would have won. Yeah, I started writing Perl. I really got proficient at by the age of 15, 16, and then I started writing C, and then from there I went to C++, and then I went to Java and Ruby. And then, most recently I started writing Rust a few years back and swore off Java. All right, let's do this. Well, it's not been an easy road. I never went to college, so a lot of people don't know that either. Well, everybody knows that now. But I never went to college. Most, a lot of it was just on the, being thrown to the wolves. So it was always interesting to me when people would come at me and be like, oh, you didn't go to college? No, I didn't, because I was poor. So there's that. Oh, nice. Yeah, QBasic, I never really learned. Like I said again, I'm not really much of a Windows person. Matter of fact, last time I was doing anything in Windows was with Hashrate recently. And that was because we were doing some desktop client stuff. Outside of that, I really haven't done much with Windows. Every now and then I get tasked with something from somebody to do something with Windows. Usually like, hey, can you get this to compile on Windows? I'll help them, that kind of stuff. But never really do I work on it professionally. All right, let's do some rolling. So I'll be rolling EFF dice. So let's see here. We got 10 people. And I didn't count. It's 12 retweets, but I don't know who the 12th person was. So number 10, so Hardwood won. Hardwood, if you're in chat, let me know. Otherwise, DM me. All right, gonna roll again as backup. See who's gonna do the backup. 6 would be Goldman Sachs. You are backup. All right. And all right, I'm gonna roll 2 more for other tiers. If you win those other tiers, DM me. If there's a specific tier you want, I will just get that tier for you. Just so that it's nice and fair. So I didn't count. We already had that person win. All right, so that would be Bennett, Tomlin. You are back up on 1. Yeah, Hardwood. That's the thing. Hardwood underscore. I mean, that's the truth there. Okay. Jesus, these dice are overweight. All right, and fuck, how many times are you gonna roll 6 there? All right. Again, I just rolled 4, 6. Diverter, DM me for a specific tier. If you didn't win this time, next time I do based, it will most likely not be on YouTube. As again, going to the privacy-centric model, I will be hosting it outside of YouTube's control. The goal is to start demonstrating what we preach here, which is moving away from these services and implementations that are dangerous to the users, and we want to protect your privacy. It matters to us and it matters to me, and I think that it's important that we are the first, that we start doing that. YouTube has proven time and time again that it's not very friendly to the crypto world, and again, like I said, congratulations on those that have won. Hardwood and Goldman Sachs, please DM me on Twitter. Bennett Tomlin, Diverter, DM me as well. You are winning a separate tier. Just tell me if there's a specific book you want from there and what tier it may be on so I can get that over to you. I want to thank the Anon who wanted me to do this. That Anon chooses not to be identified, but this person basically stated that in order for us to start getting people away from these tools, we have to start providing people with tools to start building the future. So this Anon agrees and aligns with my thoughts and feelings on certain things, and reached out to me this morning and said, hey, I really want, to know what you're doing on base tonight. And I kind of mentioned, the censorship and everything was a hot topic, and this person stated that they wanted to help contribute and give a bundle, possibly 2. And so we're going to do the bundles, and then wanted to give a few tiers to give some people some materials to start building. And so I want to thank you all for participating, retweeting on this. Like I said, again, this is not for me. There's nothing for me to gain from this. I just want, and this person wants people to learn, to be able to utilize these tools to benefit themselves and others on creating software and creating actual platforms in which users get the retention of control of their data, and to be able to change the future. And with that being said, I want to encourage you all this coming weekend. I know it's starting to be spooky season, and it should be spooky season for your data. I want you to all take this weekend and really write down the services that you use. Write down the platforms that you use, and write out an assessment, if you will. Understand what would be the worst case scenario if something were to happen. What would be the worst case scenario of your data being compromised, what someone would be able to tie to you, what someone with a bad actor would be able to find about you and correlate to your actual identity if you choose to remain pseudo-anonymous, or what could be used against you. What DMs do you have that could possibly be, leveraged against you? Things like that. Start thinking about these things. And then also I encourage you all to set up a GPG key. And I want you all to benefit from these. I want you all to benefit from all of this in the sense that I want you to be better protected. I personally have my own tool chain of things that I use, and I try my best to share everything to help you understand that. And I want you all to really take note and to take action and to be more proactive about your privacy. Yes, censorship is real. Censorship is becoming a bigger problem on platforms such as Twitter, which most of us know each other from. Understand that that is not going to always be the way that we communicate. Understand that there are better tools, and better tools come out every day, and we should benefit from them, and we should utilize them, and we should adopt and support changes. And we should support the movement away from centralized platforms into distributed networks. And we don't do that just by saying we support them. We support them by using, setting up, become an operator. Hell, you can run a guard relay right now at your house with no fear. Guard relay is not problematic. You won't get in trouble from your ISP. There's not a problem with a guard relay for Tor. There's not even a problem with an exit as long as they're not going to do spam attacks, stuff like that. But, again, maybe run a bridge. Maybe help run a bridge. Set up your own bridge. If you're unsure, ping me. I'll give you directions. I can actually send you to our repos and show you how to set it up. If you want to run your own Mastodon, that requires a little bit of work. Hit me up. I can walk you through it. I can help you with it. I have no problem doing that. Remember, I will always help you as long as you're willing to help yourself. I cannot give you everything in the world and then still help you walk you through everything and do it myself. That defeats the purpose. The purpose of this is that you as an individual grows. You as an individual becomes more self-aware of the privacy implications, and you as an individual help spread the understanding of how privacy is being eroded away and in most cases gone for most people, and you help your fellow person become better at understanding and take charge of their privacy and understanding their attack vectors and their risk. And with that, I'm going to leave you. Unless anyone else has any questions, comments, or anything like that, I'm going to turn it off as soon as I finish this smoke. And again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I want to congratulate the winners. Thank you, Anon, for helping us set this up. Thank you, Hashrate, for the channel and all this other stuff. But like I said, and if you like what you heard here, things like that, subscribe to the channel. If you're interested in me talking about a specific topic, DM me. You can find me on Twitter at Nixops. You can also find me on Telegram. Sometimes, I'm not always on there. And if you desperately need to get in touch with me on a private channel, please email me at nixops@protonmail.com. Everyone, have a wonderful evening, and I hope that you all have a great weekend.